For over 400 years, Europe was united under the vast power of the Roman Empire. Roads stretched from the sands of North Africa to the forests of Britain. Laws, taxes, armies, and trade all flowed through Rome. But in the 5th century CE, that unity collapsed. The Western Roman Empire fell, and Europe fractured into countless kingdoms, tribes, and territories. And here's the great puzzle. Why, in the 1,500 years since, has Europe never truly reunited into a single country? Why do we have dozens of separate nations, each with its own borders, armies, and identities? Today, we'll explore this timeless question by tracing the major forces that kept Europe divided: geography and natural barriers, the role of religion and the Catholic Church, the rise of kingdoms and the culture of rivalry, language and identity, and even modern attempts like the European Union. By the end, we'll see that the failure, or perhaps the refusal, of Europe to unite is not an accident. It may be the very thing that gave Europe its creativity, competition, and eventually, its global influence. The fall of Rome and the first fragmentation. When Rome collapsed in the West in 476 CE, there was no single power ready to take its place. Instead, Europe splintered. Germanic tribes like the Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Vandals, and Franks carved up former Roman lands. Why didn't one successor state simply take control? The answer lies partly in geography. Unlike China, where great rivers and fertile plains allowed centralized empires to flourish, Europe is carved up by mountain ranges, peninsulas, and coastlines. The Alps, the Pyrenees, the Carpathians, and countless rivers created natural divisions. Rome had overcome these divisions with overwhelming military power and infrastructure. But once Rome's authority vanished, local rulers naturally filled the gaps. From the very beginning, Europe's geography pushed it toward fragmentation. The role of the church, unity of faith, division of power. After Rome's fall, one institution did preserve a sense of unity: the Catholic Church. Across Europe, people still prayed to the same God, obeyed the same pope, and followed the same rituals. Latin remained the language of scholarship. In a way, Christianity replaced the empire as the glue holding Europe together. But the Church did not create a single political state. Instead, it legitimized countless kings, dukes, and emperors. The Pope might crown a Holy Roman Emperor, but that emperor never truly controlled all of Europe. This created a paradox: spiritual unity under one faith, but endless political division. The Church often benefited from this arrangement. By playing rulers against one another, it preserved its own authority. Europe remained one in religion, but many in politics, feudalism, and the local loyalties. Another reason Europe couldn't unite: feudalism. In the Middle Ages, power was local. Lords and knights controlled castles and villages. Loyalty was to your feudal lord, not to some distant king, let alone a single emperor. Europe was a patchwork quilt of loyalties and allegiances. Unlike in China, where imperial bureaucracy stretched across the land, medieval Europe had no strong central administration. This decentralized system made it nearly impossible for one ruler to dominate the entire continent. Language, culture, and identity over centuries, another force kept Europe divided: language. Latin, once universal, fractured into French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian. Germanic tongues split into German, English, Dutch, and others. Slavic languages expanded in the East. Language shaped culture, and culture shaped identity. A Frank did not think of himself as the same as a Lombard, nor did a Spaniard think of himself as a Saxon. Unlike China, which maintained a written script uniting diverse dialects, Europe's linguistic diversity reinforced political diversity. The tradition of rivalry Europe also developed a culture of competition. From the 100 Years' War between England and France to endless battles between Spain, the Habsburgs, and the Ottomans, European states fought not to unify, but to dominate. Every attempt at continent-wide rule, whether by Charlemagne, the Habsburgs, or Napoleon, eventually collapsed. Why? Because other states formed alliances to resist. In Europe, no single power was ever allowed to win for long. The balance of power kept the continent divided, but also, paradoxically, kept it dynamic. The modern age, nation-states and nationalism. By the early modern period, the idea of the nation-state emerged. France, Spain, and England solidified their borders. People increasingly identified not just with local lords, but with a national identity: French, English, Spanish. The Protestant Reformation shattered religious unity. Catholic and Protestant states competed fiercely. This deepened divisions that made a single European empire impossible. Later, the rise of nationalism in the 19th century further entrenched the idea that each people deserved its own sovereign state. Germans united as Germans, Italians as Italians, but not as Europeans. Attempts at unity. Napoleon and Hitler. There were moments when Europe seemed on the brink of unification, but always by force. Napoleon Bonaparte in the early 1800s conquered much of Europe, spreading French law and administration. Yet resistance in Spain, Russia, and elsewhere toppled him. Adolf Hitler in the 20th century sought domination, not cooperation, through war and terror. His empire was short-lived and catastrophic. Both showed that uniting Europe by force was not only impossible, but disastrous. The European Union, a new attempt at unity. After World War II, Europe tried something new, not conquest, but cooperation. The European Union, EU, created shared markets, common laws, and even a shared currency, the euro. In many ways, it is the closest Europe has come to reunification since Rome. But even today, the EU is not a single country. Member states guard their sovereignty. Britain left the Union entirely in Brexit. Disputes over migration, budgets, and national laws show how deeply independent European nations remain. Why Europe remains divided. So why, after 1,500 years, is Europe still a mosaic of nations instead of one country? The reasons are layered. Geography divides rather than unites. Religion once unified spiritually, but divided politically. Feudalism entrenched local loyalties. Languages and cultures created distinct identities. Competition and rivalry prevented one ruler from dominating. Nationalism enshrined the idea of separate states. Unlike China or India, Europe's diversity became its destiny. The paradox of division. And yet, this very disunity may explain Europe's extraordinary global influence. Competition between states fueled exploration, innovation, and science. When one kingdom censored an idea, another embraced it. Rivalries drove technological progress, from shipbuilding to gunpowder to industrial machines. Had Europe been one empire, it might have stagnated like other centralized powers. Instead, its divisions created a furnace of creativity. So why couldn't Europe unite after Rome? Because its geography, history, culture, and politics all conspired to keep it divided. And because every attempt at unification ran against the grain of its diversity. But perhaps the deeper truth is this: Europe was never meant to be one. Its strength lay in its divisions, in the clash of ideas, the rivalry of nations, and the tension between unity and independence. From the fall of Rome to the modern EU, Europe's story is not one of failed unity, but of creative diversity. And maybe that's why Europe continues to fascinate the world, not as one voice, but as a chorus of many. If you found this exploration insightful, give this video a like, share it with a friend, and subscribe to Timeless Questions for more deep dives into philosophy, history, and human nature. Because the questions may be ancient, but the wisdom is timeless.